Building or choosing the right bike for your situation, along with customization and maintenance, can be an enjoyable process. But for individuals who use their bike every day, whether it's to negotiate city traffic and get to work, or on an adventure out in the middle of nowhere, the last thing you want to think about is whether or not the bike's going to do its job. I'm not one to intentionally abuse my equipment, but when it comes time to get the shot, it needs to be up to the task. Let's find out if this P7 from Hiboy can handle my style of riding. I'm as much of an adventure rider as I am an everyday practical bicyclist, meaning that for the most part I use a bike for pretty much everything. This experience has allowed me to find the nitpicks on bikes which do affect everyday riding. Alright, let's see if we can get through this red mud road before it gets wet. That storm is definitely following us. It sounds pretty pissed off too. I see far too many e-bike channels that unbox a bike, ride it for a day, and then talk about features which are already obvious on their website. So me personally, if I don't see some mud on the tires and grime on the chain, I don't trust that review. And I even cut myself short on these bike videos saying that these are only first impressions until I have significant miles on the bike. So without babying the Hiboy P7, I'm going to tell you what I like and what I think needs to be improved. Before I even get to the bike itself, I'd like to touch on their website and some things they need to fix. Now I understand this is a new bike for them and maybe they don't have everything ready, but that doesn't mean they should rush. A lot of these photos are clearly photoshopped or doctored, essentially showing people riding their bike that are not actually riding their bike. For one instance, this individual who appears to be doing a jump on a mountain bike trail, well, this is not the bike he's riding. You can see if you zoom up and look closely. And two, this bike would not survive this, and you'll see why later on in the video. Many of the other photos as well, you can clearly tell that these individuals are riding something else. And as far as I can tell, the only person who actually is riding their bike is riding it in what I consider to be the worst possible situation, on a beach in salt water. Please don't do this, and please don't advertise this. Salt water is terrible for bikes. Seeing things like this on the website that sells the bike shows that maybe they don't test it as thoroughly as you would want them to. And individuals on a budget who are looking at bikes in this price range are going to scrutinize every possible thing. If you don't believe me, just look in the comments after this video's been up for about a week. Alright, so that's their website, but what about the bike itself? I try to end on a high note whenever I can, so let's get the negatives out of the way first. On an otherwise well-built bike, the forks are pretty terrible. In my opinion, they're not going to last very long. They're spring-loaded forks, which is not uncommon, but they're just not built very well, especially the seals on the bike themselves. The first time I rode it in the rain, water with little bits of sand and road debris got down past the seals and locked up the forks. I had to service them myself, and I'm not very good at this, obviously, because I've never done it before. But I was able to get them back in working condition. In my opinion, they need to upgrade the forks on the Hiboy. Out of the box, I had to adjust the front and rear brake calipers to keep them from rubbing, and I had to adjust the derailleur. These were easy to do, especially if you have some experience, and can be common throughout many bikes. However, I found that a lot of the e-bikes I get for review have these pre-adjusted from the factory. Now let's move on to some neutral thoughts. I'm a tall rider. This bike doesn't suit me very well because I'm 6'4". Under short trips it doesn't bother me, but for long trips it starts to get to you. It's also in my opinion that this bike is set up for more of an active rider who actually plans on helping the bike out. Not because the bike lacks power, but because the seat and handlebar setup, the geometry of the bike, means that if you try to cruise for a long duration with just the motor doing all the work, the seat becomes almost unbearably uncomfortable. I actually found it more comfortable to pedal with the motor because it helps take stress off of the pressure points. And again, I would like to point out that I'm not really knocking the seat or geometry setup of this bike. I'm just making sure that anyone who's considering this bike realizes it's designed out of the box for an active rider, a lot like a street bike would have a subpar seat that's not meant for cruising and comfort. They're just meant to be lightweight. So if you're somebody who plans on just having the motor do pretty much all the work all the time, this is probably not the bike for you, or at the very least, you would want to upgrade the seat and maybe get some lifted handlebars. The P7's gone with a basic bare bones design, no fenders, no racks, no rear tail light, the basic necessities. It does come with a headlight, which is actually pretty good. This is one of the better headlights I've reviewed on bikes so far. No USB charging on the heads-up display, which is a little unfortunate considering the range that they advertise with this bike. For the heads-up display, I wasn't able to find any documentation that would allow me to make customized settings in this bike. However, that might not be necessary, as you'll see here in a moment. A common complaint I have with most electric bikes that use these half-twist throttle grips is that the return spring on the throttle is too strong, meaning that if you try and hold it down for a long duration, your wrist starts to get fatigued. After a while of holding down these electric throttles, my hand fatigues. It might just be me. This hand has not been treated very well since I've started riding bikes, especially after we power looped the Phantom 85. But that hand's never been the same. And after a while of holding down these electric throttles, these half throttles, that might be what it is. It might be because it's a half throttle, not a full throttle. Because I never feel this riding the gas bikes when you're obviously on the throttle all the time. But yeah, these return springs they put in these, they're just too strong. You need to put one in that's like half as strong. Climbing a nice little hill here. Oh, hello. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, we were. Jesus. Yeah, those forks they're working. They're just not great. We brought the Taft down here a couple months ago. Forgot about this. We stopped right here because the red mud was getting sucked into the chain. There is absolutely no reason why the return spring on the throttle needs to be this stiff, so I don't know why electric bike companies keep doing this. In their defense, most bike companies do this, which is why I prefer a thumb throttle. But they could always be the first to fix the issue. So let's go ahead and move on to the things I like about this bike, and where I think they did a good job. Out of every e-bike I've tested so far, the pedal assist combination with this particular speed controller and how it interacts with the throttle is the best I've tested. So, generic pedal assist, cadence sensor. No real complaints about it, but nothing impressive. What I want to talk about is this very smooth throttle with really good resolution. It's not touchy, It applies very smooth, it's easy to control, and it's easy to hold, which is really nice, especially in situations like this where you want to control a very precise speed and amount of torque. It's annoying when bumps in the road cause you to jostle the throttle just a little bit and throw it off. Don't have that problem with this bike. Another thing I really like about it is this is the only bike I have where the throttle overrides the pedal assist. And what I mean by that is on all my other bikes so far, once you start pedaling, the speed controller completely ignores the throttle. It no longer cares where the throttle is. It will try to push the bike up to whatever pedal assist level you have it set to. This one's the opposite. The pedal assist can be going, right? The moment it realizes that you've engaged the throttle, it completely shuts off the pedal assist. It essentially ignores it altogether. So every bit of motor power is coming from where you have the throttle set. This essentially means for me that I don't care if it has lack of options for pedal assist, because once you touch the throttle, that's it, you have complete control. And I have no idea where I'm going. Pedal assist on the P7 is not governed by a speed limit on any of the pedal assist levels. Instead, it limits the amount of current given to the motor, but will continue to deliver that current for as long as you're pedaling all the way up into the bike's top speed. This makes changing gears feel a lot more natural and really complements the active rider style of this bike. And because the motor will never abruptly shut off power, it doesn't interrupt your flow, for lack of a better word, and makes all the gears on the cassette feel usable. Moving on to the throttle, they did a lot of things right here as well. This is the only bike I've tested so far where the throttle overrides the pedal assist instead of the other way around. I'd also like to point out that this is the most precise and highest resolution throttle I've tested so far. It's very easy to hold a precise speed without the bike jerking all over the place, even when you're negotiating tricky situations. The bike does appear to have a slight delay when it first activates the throttle, but once you're using the throttle, any adjustments are instant. And as far as I can tell, the motor and speed controller combination has no minimum speed limit. You can crawl down to less than a mile an hour with the throttle. I don't know if that's practical in any situation, but it just goes to show how precisely set up this thing is. Unfortunately, there's no cruise control that I could find on this bike, which is only something that I've just recently begun to enjoy on other bikes. Had there been an option to set cruise control on this bike, my complaint about the stiff throttle return spring probably wouldn't have made it into the video, because in that situation it simply wouldn't have mattered. Another setup on this bike which also helps complement the active rider style is the cassette. You have 9 speeds, making it so that you never run out of cadence on this bike. All the way up to top speed, you can pedal just fine, apply resistance without your legs running away. And at the lowest speed, it pretty much applies a granny gear, meaning you can crawl through tough situations with ease. However, it's a single speed chainring, and to get to those first 2 gears, it will tend to make a little bit of noise, as it's got to move that chain quite a long ways to get to the first 2 gears. As with other electrics I've tested so far, the frame itself looks solid, and I have no concerns about this thing not lasting the test of time. On to water resistance. I didn't see anything on their website about water resistant ratings, but I tell every company that sends me a bike they need to be able to withstand real world riding conditions, and one of those conditions is riding in the rain. The P7 passed this test almost with flying colors. The electronics on the bike didn't have any issues, just the forks. I took the bike out in a severe downpour and rode it around, making sure that everything that could get wet was soaked. And this wasn't just a quick jump out and ride in the rain then quickly get back inside. I used about half of the battery's capacity, rode through the entirety of the storm, and then proceeded to go down a gravel trail. Immediately after the ride, I checked the bike's battery for any water integration, and other than the very edges of the battery, it was bone dry. And keep in mind, there are no fenders on this bike. This battery was taking the brunt of the splash. The speed controller is tucked up safely into the frame where it really can't get wet other than maybe some splashing. And 2 days later, when I rode the bike again, nothing appeared to have any water damage or water seepage. This included checking the motor, the heads-up display, the light, and horn. They advertise their motor as only 500 watts, but I'll be honest, this thing's a little more torquey than I expected from a 500 watt. It feels like a 750 watt motor on my fat tire bikes, and this might be because the diameter of the tires is a little bit smaller. These are 27.5 inch tires. The smaller your tires, the more torquey the motor will feel, which is why the folding fat tire e-bikes feel so torquey. Throughout city riding and on these little trails, I felt the motor to be more than adequate for my situations. The bike uses a 48 volt, 15 amp hour battery in the belly of the frame. I like the frame integration, but their range estimations seem a bit generous. I haven't tested this yet. I generally wait to do a range test until I've had the bike for about 2 months at least and significant recharge cycles on the battery. But given the fact that this bike really complements the active rider style, I feel that I could probably get in between their range estimations with moderate pedal assist, especially with how this bike's pedal assist and generous gear ratio is set up. So those are my thoughts and opinions about the Hiboy P7. I think it's an all-around solid bike which is great for an active style rider, but not great for somebody who just wants to let the bike do all the work. I also think they need to upgrade the forks on this for longevity. It seems clear to me that this is for somebody who wants to use a bike for transportation without all the bells and whistles. And it can also make a nice platform for upgrading the bike to customize your style of riding. I personally tend to enjoy fat tire bikes more when it comes to e-bikes, but this does open the door for a lot more options when it comes to upgrading components on the bike. So I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or at the very least were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.